In a story that developed over the past few hours, the Speaker of the National Assembly, Thandi Modise, has approved a request by the Democratic Alliance to institute proceedings to remove the Public Protector from office. The DA tabled a motion for Busisiwe Mkhwebane's removal following a number of negative court judgments against her. Now, last year, Parliament set up new rules to allow for the removal of the head of a Chapter 9 institution. The new rules dictate that a 3-member independent panel should be set up in consultation with political parties to investigate whether evidence exists for the removal. We contacted the Public Protector's office for comment, but referred to her social media page. On Twitter, she said she wouldn't comment as she hadn't been formally notified but had learnt of the developments via the media. But we're joined now on the line by David Lewis, who is the Executive Director of Corruption Watch. A very good evening to you, David. Thanks for your time. Well, you've long called for the Public Protector to go, calling her professionally incompetent. Let's get your reaction first of all to this.
Well, we're obviously very pleased that this decision has been taken finally. The Public Protector should have been subject to this inquiry a long time ago, but better late than never, so we're delighted.
You previously, in fact last year, I think at about June, July, written to Thandi Modise asking that this process be put into action quite soon. Talk to us about the basis for your reasons on why you wanted this to go ahead quite speedily.
Well, I think that they're well known, and we're joined in this by a large range of other organisations, institutions, individuals. I mean, on a number of occasions, she's been found to be incompetent, biased, unable to understand the Constitution and the laws that she's the legal framework within which she's meant to operate. And she's been found to have lied to Parliament. But worst of all, she has, in our view, exhibited incredible political bias. I mean, it seems to us that if you follow the pattern of her investigations, the outcome of her investigations, and the manner in which those occasions on which she's told lies, omitted facts, hasn't disclosed evidence that she's heard, it shows a pattern of bias in the political agenda that is really, hanging a fence in terms of the kind of work that people like her are meant to do. They're meant to do their job above all without fear, favour or prejudice, and she has shown they're neither capable of meeting none of those criteria.
Meeting none of those criteria, but didn't you previously back Busisiwe Mkhwebane when she was recommended for the post, saying that she displayed true leadership skills during the interview process?
During the interview, she conducted a fairly good interview. I have to say that, at the time, what we did was to try and render the process as independent and transparent as we possibly could, and we contributed to that process, and indeed that was the case. We didn't back any candidate or refuse to back any candidate. What we did find, and we those are lessons that we are transmitting to Parliament now and have been doing for a long while, and to the public, is that many elements of the process were completely flawed, not least of all the shortlisting process. And, when we look back on Mkhwebane's appointment, I mean, there are a number of red flags. Firstly, her previous membership of the security establishment, but above all, the incredibly junior position in which she was engaged at the time of being appointed. And to have been elevated from that position to one of the most senior responsible positions in the land was a grave error. And it was, but I stand by what I said. She did a fairly competent interview. But, if you recall, the committee interviewed something like, I think it was 16 candidates over a space of about 20 hours consecutively. So
yeah. But David, why
it was not a very fair process.
Yeah, David, why didn't you raise it then? At the time that you were impressed with the interview process of Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane, why didn't you raise some of these red flags during the time?
We did. We certainly did. But we were not. We didn't appear before the committee.
Yeah.
What we did is that we pressurized the success. Were successful in having the process televised. We made sure that the CVs were made public. We vetted the candidates. And I understand that, and I'm sure we've all been involved in the best of processes. You sometimes hit the target and you sometimes don't. But in this instance, I think there were deep flaws in the process. The shortlisting process was ludicrous, and, we tried to intervene in that, but we had no, particular standing to do so, which is why the public should be more and more engaged in these processes.
Yeah, just very quickly, David, before we wrap up, there have been multiple complaints marking the public protector's tenure, and this motion will follow new rules adopted recently. Are you able to tell us how this will happen next?
Well, briefly, what happens now is that the Speaker has to appoint an independent panel to make a preliminary assessment, a panel which may include a judge, and I rather hope that it does. And this panel will make an independent assessment. It will then pass its findings and any recommendation back to the Speaker, who must then appoint a committee of Parliament to reflect on those findings and on that recommendation, make its own finding. And if the finding is to remove the public protector from office, then that is transmitted to the House of Assembly, to the National Assembly, which then must decide that by, I think it is a two-thirds majority.
Yeah. David Lewis, thank you very much indeed for your time, the Executive Director of Corruption Watch. We stay on that.